So we're going to start by just introducing everyone. So to my left is Mr. Marsiglia, I'm Miss Ross. To my right is Miss Enright, then it's Mr. Chmiel and Mr. Pelton. So we're going to start with Mr. Marsiglia's OQ to begin.
My opening question is, why does Mercury take so long to intervene Aeneas when he's been in love with Dinah for such a short time? Why didn't he just intervene as soon as Dinah felt anything for Aeneas?
That's a good question.
I agree.
So wait, are you asking about Dido or are you asking about Aeneas' love? Why didn't Mercury intervene with Dido or Aeneas?
With Aeneas.
So like stop him from...
Well, wasn't Mercury acting on Jupiter, Jove's orders to come down and like deliver the message?
Yes, but why did it take so long for the gods to figure that out? I feel like it's completely unnecessary for this entire problem to arise.
Well, I think that Venus wanted to ask Jupiter, or no, not Jupiter. They wanted to ask Jove. Venus wanted to ask Jove if they could, if Juno and Venus could like cast the spell to make Dido and Aeneas fall in love. And I don't think Juno, which is Hera, I don't think she ever really asked. So they kind of went on without asking Jove like for permission. So they were kind of doing this all behind his back.
I would agree with that because I just found on the page 135 in Fagles, King Ivarus, who it says is a son of Jove, prays to him that something should happen to Dido because now she's suddenly in love with Aeneas and has spurned all the other kings and suitors from Africa. So it seems like Jove didn't know, and then that's how he finds out, is that this king prays to him to do something about it.
Yeah, so I'm agreeing with Mr. Pelton so like Jove had no idea that this was going on, and Iarbas was the one to kind of like set off that alarm and ask him to like do something about it because he wasn't happy about it, about Aeneas and Dido being in love.
That answers my question.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next OQ. My question is, on page 130 in Fables, Juno suggests Dido and Aeneas get married, but why would Juno suggest that they get married if she doesn't want the Trojans or the new Romans to kind of hurt her, Carthage?
I thought it was because she thought that it was a good idea that like if Dido and Aeneas got married, then it was kind of like combining the Trojans and the Tyrans. Yeah. And if you combine the two of them, then it was like, I don't know, if they came together, then they would unite and just be like a solid tribe.
Be a great power.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the Rudin, she even, Juno says, as for Juno's husband's slaves, she'll hand you all these Tyranians as a dowry, so basically yeah, they'll be joined together if they get married, as almost like a gift.
I think even going off of that, once they're married, there's no more like difference between the Trojans and the Tyrians or the Carthaginians. I think they're called both. So like you can't, like Juno favors the Carthaginians. So like if the Trojans marry into the Carthaginians, then like there's no way the Carthaginians can get wiped out by the Trojans because they're the same people now.
And I understand what you're saying through that, but I think in book 1, or at the very beginning of the Aeneid, I remember it says that it is the fate, like it's fate that the Trojans will bring down Carthage, or that Carthage will just be taken down as a city and like as a whole. So why would Juno like risk that by allowing them in? Do you know what I mean?
Not really.
What are you trying to say?
Okay, so it's like it says that because of fate, Juno knows that her city will be crushed by the Trojans.
Oh, so why would she let the Trojans in if she knew?
Yes. So why would she let them in if that's fate?
I mean, I think that's one of the larger themes of the whole book, is that a lot of people try to do things even when fate says something else. So, like, Aeneas stays in Carthage when he knows fate has already told him, go to Italy.
Yeah.
And then, like, the Trojans, and back when we read the Iliad, knew Troy would fall, but they still fought for 10 years. So it just seems like it's a bunch of, like, it's almost like divided into like the humans on one level, the gods above them, and then like fate even is above the gods.
Yeah.
Like even the gods have to follow fate. They don't get to choose. They can like fight it the whole time like humans do. But in the end, everyone still goes with what fate's decided.
To add on to that, I think that emotion overrides logic a lot in the Iliad and the Aeneid. So I think that even though they know it's the wrong thing, they do it because their emotions tell them that it's the right thing, and they think that emotions are more important than what the gods or fate say. They think that it's a higher law, but they are always proved wrong by the gods.
I understand that, but I don't know, if I were Juno, I don't think I would have led the Trojans into Carthage just because of what fate is saying. But I do understand where you guys are coming from. And I just want to go back, because on book 1, on page like 48 in Fagles, it says, but she heard a race of men sprung of Trojan blood would one day topple down her Tyrian stronghold, breed an arrogant people ruling far and wide. So she does know, but she does know that like fate is going to crush her city. But I understand like what you guys are saying.
She might be thinking also like that their love could like override fate, and like if they fall in love, then the Trojans won't want to attack Carthage because they'll be like bonded through marriage.
Yeah.
So they'll become like equals and like they'll be peaceful among them.
Yeah.
Really happy
I agree
ending.
with that.
That makes sense. I'm thinking that we'll move on to the next OQ now.
Okay. So mine has to do with Dido, and mine was, so Dido clearly has a need to be in control, or at least that's what I gathered in her wanting to take her own life. So maybe she believes she can control her love with Aeneid by calling it a marriage, and she believes she can command him to fall in love with her. But like maybe, I was just wondering, do we think she actually thinks that he loves her, or do you think she's just saying all this because she wants control and wants him to fall in love with her? Very long question.
So you're asking if Dido really loves Aeneas.
Yeah, does she really love Aeneas, and does she really think that Aeneas loves her, or is she just trying to make Aeneas fall in love with her? Like, is she just trying to control him?
Why would she want to control?
Because I feel like she wants to control like a lot of things in her life, and like not having control of her love, she's trying to control that feeling maybe by making him love her. I don't know.
Well, I feel like she is in love because she was struck by Cupid, like a while, like before this any of this like happened. So she clearly is in love, and I think she's trying to convince
Aeneas, but it does. I think it does have a sense of she needs to like control, and she's like obsessed with control too, because like she like stops paying attention to like the city. She stops paying attention to her people, and like it's all so that she can pay attention to Aeneas. But like that again, it does give off that sense of she wants control over like what she feels for him, and she thinks that like, oh, maybe if I can like keep him here, like I'll be able to control that because like he'll be here, so I don't have to deal with him being somewhere else. And I think that starts to come out when they first have their big argument, is that she's so upset that he's readying the ships and like didn't tell her about this or anything. Like she just thinks he's gonna leave and not say a word, so she's like concerned that she's losing control of him staying in Carthage.
I agree with that. And I don't think that Dido would be pretending to have these feelings just because of the pain that she's been through already by losing her first husband, Zacchaeus. So I don't think she would be pretending or trying to like force herself or force Aeneas to fall in love with her, just because I feel like that would end in a very painful way, and that's not what she wants for herself.
I think it's also important to consider the possibility that it is not for love, that she is trying to be with Aeneas, because when Aeneas lands on her beach, she is a queen without a king, and she has the entire responsibility of this entire people, and she's starting a new kingdom. But when she sees Aeneas and she hears his great tale, and
Sorry about that.
she sees a perfect fit, and she thinks that their army combined with their new prospering society would be really amazing, be much more powerful than without. So it could just be like a business arrangement for all we know.
I think it could have started out like that, but then when the gods intervene, it just jumps to the next level up, and she has no control over that. So like, I think before the gods had intervened, if like Aeneas and all the Trojans had stayed in Carthage for a while, like repairing their ships, it could have developed into that like naturally. But like with the gods, like we talked about before, it just gets so compressed into such a short amount of time that like Dido gets overwhelmed with these feelings. They all happen like in this, like a few seconds instead of over the course of like a month or two, or like whatever naturally would have occurred between her and Aeneas.
Do we think that she like might have known like that he was going to leave her and like knew that he wasn't going to ever love her? Because I found a quote in the Rudin, it was page 82, but she says, "As surely as I saw this great grief coming, so surely I'll endure it." So maybe, I was just wondering, do you think maybe she knew that he was going to leave her and that she was going to have to endure all this pain again? So she was trying to like say that they were married so it could like maybe fix this before it happened.
I'm thinking that she like tried to label it as being married kind of very quickly so she wouldn't lose him, and so he wouldn't be able to just leave.
Yeah.
But then, you know, in Fables on 139, we've said this quote like a million times. He says, Aeneas says, "Nor did I once extend the bridegroom's torch or enter into a marriage pact with you." So like, I don't know, I feel like men and women, at least in this time, have a different idea of what marriage is.
Yeah.
And even with her calling it marriage, it still doesn't fix the problem or fix him leaving her.
Also, it was his plan all along to like continue on to Italy and build their city. So I think like you were asking like, did she know that he was going to leave? I think she just had in the back of her mind like his original mission was to continue on. So now that she's falling in love with him, she's just anticipating for the worst.
Also, one more quote. When they get married, Dido actually says she no longer thinks to keep the affair secret. No, she calls it a marriage, using the word to clip her sense of guilt. The fact that she feels guilty upon marriage, that just means that she has doubt from the beginning that it's not meant to be.
Yeah. So I think we can move on to the next OQ now.
Yeah. My OQ it's kind of like a two-parter. So it was Aeneas's love for for Dido, not enough for him to stay. You know, like the gods told him at the end of the book to keep going and go on to Italy and settle somewhere else. But my question is, was his love like? Do you guys think his love was not great enough to just disregard what the gods were telling him and to stay? And do you think he actually loves Dido?
Well, I do think that Aeneas loves her, but I think that when Mercury comes down and tells Aeneas to leave for Italy again, I think, and Mercury mentions, do this for your son, your son, belongs in Italy. I think his love for his son overpowers his love for Dido. And because he doesn't want to leave, at least that's the way it seems. But his love for his son is obviously overtaking
The love for Dido.
and it's a very new love for
That's
Dido
right.
that he has, and it's his son.
I feel like, oh, sorry.
All right. I would definitely agree that he does love Dido to some degree, but it might not be to the same degree as his son. It was on page 141 in the Fagles, around 500. This is talking about Aeneas. It says, "Still mourning deeply, heart shattered by his great love. In spite of all, he obeys the god's commands." So he's clearly heartbroken that the gods are telling him to leave, but he knows that you obey the gods, that's just what you do, kind of thing. So it's one of those, I want to stay, but I've pretty much been forced to leave, on top of I'm doing this for my son. So it's not two things heavily weighing against staying with Dido just because he loves her.
I agree with Miss Ross and Mr. Pelton that he loves her, and I also think maybe though he loves her, but this just wasn't the right time for him. He loves her a lot, and what I found in the Rudin on page 81, after their whole face off, and Dido just said threatens to kill herself, and he doesn't really react. He actually freezes because he has nothing to say, because I feel he loves her so much, but he just can't love her right now because he knows he must obey the gods, and so instead he says nothing because it almost protects him, I feel to not show his love for her.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And then on page 139, this is just a quote where he mentions his son, and at the very bottom, 444, it says, "My son, Ascanius, I feel the wrong I do to one so dear, robbing him of his kingdom, lands in the west, his fields decreed by fate." So he obviously wants to do right by his son, but I also think that he's almost using this as an excuse to kind of prove to himself that this is why he has to leave. Does that make sense?
Yeah. To not fall into what the gods are saying.
Yeah.
He's making his own decision, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand that.
He's just using the god's command as the backup for it.
Yeah.
I would definitely agree with that, just because the way that every time Aeneas tries to explain himself, it's always well, the gods commanded it, and it's pretty much the same phrase just over and over again every time he explains it. Even in later books when he sees Dido after she's dead, he says pretty much the same lines, well, the gods told me. So it doesn't really seem like he has any more of an excuse to tell someone, to try to justify it, other than the gods told me, so I went.
Okay. Then we can move on to our last OQ.
All right. So for mine was when Aeneas is preparing to leave. He's down on the ships, and Dido's up in her city, contemplating suicide, and that there's danger, and that why is he still here, and that he needs to leave. But at the same time, Dido was contemplating trying to keep them in Troy, but then she decides not, send her soldiers down to the boats to keep them there. So, like, what danger was Mercury warning Aeneas about if Dido had already decided that she was just going to kill herself instead of trying to seize the Trojans? That was kind of a long question.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I got you.
So you're asking what changed her mind?
Well, I'm saying she changes her mind, and then Mercury goes to Aeneas and tells him, like, there's danger, you have to go. But, like, she'd already changed her mind before Mercury even went to Aeneas to, like, not send troops to him. So, like, what was the danger that Mercury was, like, warning Aeneas about?
I mean, I know that she has already changed her mind, but before she changed her mind, she was pretty pissed off that she should have just, like, killed him and this shouldn't have happened at all. So maybe it's the gods being afraid that she'll change her mind again, just because in Fagles on 148, she says, I should have torched their camp and flooded their decks with fire, the son, the father, and the whole Trojan line. I should have wiped them out, then hurled myself on the pyre to crown it all. So that still includes her killing herself, but it also includes her killing, like, the whole army. So maybe she just got impatient and her emotions kind of overcame her and she couldn't wait anymore. She was just suffering so much that she just went straight to the pyre instead of killing all of them before.
Going off of that, she was obviously having some major mood swings at the time. She couldn't decide what she wanted to do about the situation. And she came to the conclusion that she wasn't going to kill them, but that she was going to kill herself. How do we know that Dido's army wouldn't have just attacked the Trojan ships once they found her dead body? Would that be a reason, like, to find revenge? Because I know that in the Iliad, when Hector was killed, they needed to get revenge to bring honor back to his name. So maybe they were which goddess was it that came down to them?
Mercury.
Yeah, so maybe Mercury told them to leave in case they attacked for the reason of her being dead, or if she orders them, she changes her mind again.
Okay, I could definitely see her changing her mind again, just because she changes it like 5 times on the previous page, like just toying with different ideas. I think it's in the Rudin that it's translated slightly better, but like here it's just like question after question after question. Or I think in class we were saying the Rudin has like she's like making the statement like, oh, I'll have them killed. No, I'll have the ships burned. Like, no, I'll kill myself. So I think that's definitely one of the driving pieces there then, that her mind is all over the place with this.
But it also makes me wonder why she chose to kill herself instead of just picking up kind of where she left off. Because I feel like she could have done that very easily, but instead she kills herself and then Carthage is, up in flames. So maybe the gods kind of did that.
I thought we were saying, I think it's because she was trying to be in control, and like that was her way of like controlling her own destiny. Like I think it was like she was saying, basically like sticking it to the gods. Like if I can't be with Aeneas, then I just won't be at all. Like it was kill myself.
Well, I think she also kills herself, because on page 86 in the Rudin, she says, I could not live a blameless life, unmarried, like a wild thing, and be spared this agony. So yeah, she's killing herself because she wants control, and because she also just couldn't live with herself anymore, because I feel like she also feels she broke her promise to her dead husband, and Aeneas doesn't love her, so she's just like, well, I'm going to kill myself then, because at least I can
What's her
whisper.
love for?
Also, not only was her honor broken when Aeneas broke up or left her, but her reputation as a queen was also broken. On page 138 of Rudin, around line 400, it says, Dido says, thanks to you, the African tribes, Numidian warlords hate me. Even my own Tyrians rise against me. Thanks to you, my sense of honor is gone. My one and only pathway to the stars, the renown I once held dear. So, it almost seems that her kingdom could be ruined, like the social, the unspoken agreements that people had. It's just, it has completely messed up her kingdom.
I think that's one of the main reasons that she does kill herself is because like you can't regain that reputation once everyone else around you knows you as like, oh, like some guy on a ship showed up, you like just decided to marry him and call it a marriage when you like didn't go for any of the suitors that have been like trying to marry you for all these years. Like you just got with the guy who just showed up off a boat. I feel like the other kingdoms wouldn't take her seriously after that, even if she had been like, all right, I'm not going to kill myself, I'm going to try to rebuild Carthage. Like the other kingdoms wouldn't take her seriously anymore.
Okay, so I think that about wraps it up. Have a good
That's
night,
all.
everyone.